Hey, good morning, Drive Time. Welcome back. As always, I'm Dave Drum, and today we have the opportunity to hear from someone new to the program. We are joined by Dr. Steven Fettke. He is a retired professor of 40 years at Southeastern University here in Lakeland, Florida. Dr. Fettke, welcome to Drive Time.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So for some of you who are watching, you know that I am currently taking classes at Southeastern, and that's actually how I got connected with Dr. Fettke. I was given the opportunity to read one of his articles, and the article specifically has to do with engaging the physically and mentally handicapped people in our congregations into ministry. So after reading the article, and in addition to the coursework side of it, I just felt led to contact Dr. Fettke and ask him to be a part of Drive Time because I believe he's got a very specific point of view, given the fact that his son Philip is autistic. So, Dr. Fettke, would you share with us a little bit about, kind of the purpose behind the article and a little bit about your son Philip?
Yes, the article was written out of my passion about ministry to and by the mentally and physically challenged, and it came as a result of my wife's and my frustration with the local church in not accepting our son just as he is, or realizing that he brings with him particular gifts despite the severity of his disability. And so I certainly was frustrated and angry about that. Not that our faith was diminished. Certainly our faith was deep and vital, especially when you have such a deep need in your own home. But I was wanting him to be embraced fully by the church community, and it was not. He was not. And so I wrote in the article about his being created in God's image and used examples from the Bible, for instance, and being imbued by the Spirit. John the Baptist was filled with the Spirit while he was still in the womb. Mary comes in and meets the mother of John, and the baby leaps in his womb, and they're filled with the Spirit. And so even from childhood, the Spirit can work and be a ministry and be ministered to, despite our preconceptions about how things should be. In our life, we have had people offer to help us, which we needed, but people also who recognized the kind of gifts that Philip could bring to a church. It's just so sad that it took so very long for that to occur. When I wrote the article it's about 14 years ago, we had finally, after he had become an adult, for pity's sake, been accepted in a Pentecostal church community. It was a very large Sunday school class in a large church here in Lakeland of older Pentecostals who loved him and accepted him and received his ministry back to them in ways that we had never had experienced before. So thanks be to God that occurred. Otherwise, I would have been really cynical about the local church. So if we get around to it, I'd like to talk a bit about how the local church can embrace those who we view as differently able. We use the term disabled. They're just differently abled than we who are so-called abled, yet they still have gifts and blessings to give, as long as those of us who are abled are open to receive the ministry that they have to us, as well as being willing to minister to them. So I hope we can, in our conversation, come around to that.
Well, and I think now is as good time as any to kind of go down that road a little bit, in the sense of, before we started recording, we had talked about you had a specific thought of being able to share how your son was able to minister to others in your congregation at your local church. And if you could share with us a little bit of that story, so that it puts into context for our viewers exactly what that looks like sometimes, because it's not necessarily being a member of an established ministry within the church in order to be able to minister to those in the church.
All right, I have two quick stories then. One is in this Sunday school class. It's actually as large as a small church. There's almost 100 people who attended the class. So almost to a person, they all learned to love my son, and he's nonverbal mostly, and is very severely disabled. However, he is very loving, but he does it in a different way. For the older women, he would give them a kiss on the cheek, but the older men, he would come and rub the back of their head, and that way they knew that he was giving them the fellowship hug, so to speak, in the way that he could. And it was so touching to them that my son was reaching out to them. The second story has to do with one of his activities. He loves to go shopping with my wife, which of course relieves me from having to go shopping with my wife. Since he is a child, he's just loved to go on shopping excursions with her. And so this was just, probably less than a year ago during the pandemic, when she was able to go out with masks. And no, it was just before the pandemic. I'm sorry. She was able to go out to a store with my son. And typically he does not go to strangers. He will go to people that he knows to show affection, but to strangers, he never does that. And so she has him get the shopping cart, and then when they're finished, put the shopping cart up. So he's doing that. He's putting the shopping cart up. He's turned around to walk back to her, and a woman walks in the door where the shopping carts are kept. And she says to him to give her the cart, but he doesn't. Instead, it's a total stranger now. He walks right over to her, it's an older woman, and gives her a kiss on the cheek. My wife was mortified. She thought, this woman will think this young man is attacking her or being inappropriate or whatever. And my wife begins to stumble an apology, and the woman holds her hand up. I'm going to get emotional. She stops him. She says, "Today was my birthday. No one gave me a hug. No one acknowledged my birthday except him. How did he know that?" she said. It was just utterly amazing that the Spirit of God could speak to someone so severely disabled. And wouldn't it be wonderful for those of us in the church to receive simple yet profound ministries like that?
So that's an amazing illustration of how God can work through those that, we who are fully abled, fully, mentally and physically abled, we think in terms of, like I said earlier, established ministries, and, especially, myself being involved in men's ministry, that there are ways to minister to those around us, whether in the congregation or at the store, like your story mentions. And I'd actually like to share with you and with those watching kind of a similar story where I was the recipient of that ministering by someone who, we might look at and say, oh, well, they don't have a place in ministry. So I would gone to church in a very frustrated state. I had a pretty challenging week at work, and as church started and the worship music was playing, my head was still very much clouded with the weight of my world, and what am I going to do, and how is this going to affect me, and not really giving any of that over to God. But in front of me, there's a young girl in a wheelchair who is not verbal. I believe she has muscular dystrophy, and as she sat there, and the music started to play, her mother pulled out a small plastic microphone, and those who go to church with me are fully aware of who I'm talking about. But this young girl starts to, for lack of better terms, squeal in response to the worship music that's being played. And you can see the delight on her face and the delight on her mother's face as she is fully engaged in this time of worship. And the immediately the phrase pops into my head, a joyful noise. And from that point until service was over, I couldn't tell you anything about the message. I couldn't tell you anything about the rest of my experience at church that day, because I was actively waiting for service to be over so that I could engage this girl and engage her mom to thank them, because here I was physically abled and she's disabled, or in your words, differently abled, clearly differently abled on that day, to minister to me, to remind me, what was important. That in that moment, at that time, it wasn't for me to be burdened by my cares of the world, but to just let it go and give it to God and worship God in that moment. And I thanked her mom for sharing her with us. And I don't know that there's anyone else in the world who could have ministered to me that day as effectively as this young girl did.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. I have many more stories like that. I just lament the fact that the church, the local church, regardless of denomination, is missing out on so much by not including in every way possible people who are differently abled. If I may, I'd like to talk about a challenge for the week. I think that's your goal, isn't it? To encourage folks who are listening to think about doing certain things. And after hearing our stories, I'm hoping that your listeners will realize that there might be this unexplored wealth of spiritual help, as well as unexplored wonderful opportunities to minister to those. And it's not just the differently able, but the able as well. Sadly, too many of us come to church so self-consumed, self-absorbed, as you described yourself, that we forget that there are those all around us in the service who are wrestling with their own issues. And so why not just simply go to someone as the Spirit leads and say, what's going on in your life? Especially with visitors, please go up and simply introduce yourself and ask their name. And that's another issue I have with people who are new, who come to church, and no one asks their name or even says hello. So not just in church, but maybe in your neighborhood, or maybe as you walk through Publix or Walgreens, just have a friendly hello and say, I hope your day goes well. And maybe that'll spur a conversation in which you get a chance to say, what's going on in your life? What's truly important to you, and what was the best thing that happened to you today, or whatever. And you'd be surprised at how people will respond. And So if we can just do that simple thing, wherever we might be, in church or in our neighborhood or in the local business, I think it'll make a huge difference.
I think that's a great challenge for each of us this week. And if I can ask one more question in addition to that before our time ends, is if you come across someone who is differently abled, and you see that there are some physical challenges or mental challenges, and at the risk of this sounding like a really dumb question, what is your recommendation for how we engage them? You mentioned your son's nonverbal and doesn't approach strangers. Is there a way that we can be welcoming without causing issues?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that question. I can speak directly as a parent of a disabled child. I'm as proud of him as I am of our abled twin daughters. And so I want folks to introduce themselves to him and find out about Philip. But many are afraid to do so, simply not knowing what to do. So it's just very easy. Just simply ask the caretaker, how may I meet your son or daughter? How does he communicate? And just how may we become acquainted? It's just very simple. Just ask the questions and see how they respond. And I think they will be so pleased that you showed just a modicum of interest in them. And you also might be surprised at how they might bless you in return. You just weren't even expecting it. You were just trying to be friendly, and it turns around that they bless you. So I just find it very exciting when I am able to meet parents with differently abled kids, regardless of their age, whether they're adults like my son or whether infants like other couples. It's just an exciting thing that you can engage in and be blessed yourself.
Well, Dr. Fettke, thank you. Thank you for spending some time with us, but also for sharing your son Philip with us, and quite frankly, for writing this paper. For those of you who are watching, guys, I'm going to actually link the article in the description of the video, so that if you're curious about the article and so much more context than we were able to talk about today, it's a great read. I think it's like 14 or 15 pages, so it's not super long, but you may, hopefully, that you're moved in the same way that I was by the story of the Fettke family. So, Dr. Fettke, thank you again. Gentlemen, we'll see you again next week here on Drive Time.